In the fast-paced world of business, finding a clear path to profitability can be a challenge. Welcome to 0 to 100 with your host, Jared Guy Randolph, seasoned business and finance expert. Tune in for actionable insights and strategies to accelerate your business success.
Hello, Accelerators. Today on 0 to 100, I am very excited to introduce our guest, Roger Chen, who is a financial advisor as well as a fractional CFO service leader at MYeCFO that works with businesses like yours, founders, entrepreneurs, executives, helping you create more profitability. He's been in the business for over 25 years and worked with the big shops like AIG, Ernst Young, as well as New York Life. And he has a chartered financial analyst designation. The guy is wicked smart. Some of the topics that we will cover will be things such as when you should actually bring in that CFO, what you should expect from the CFO, the 3 portfolio frameworks you should have structured around your business and frankly around your life, and the 7-step pathway to profit formula. It's not going to be what you expected. It wasn't what I expected. I want you to tune in because these are things that you can apply to your business and they will make a difference overnight. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jared Guy Randolph. I am the founder of BoxFi. We are the nation's leading payment consultant, providing payment processing solutions that help grow your business. And I'm excited to share the network that I've built over my 25-year entrepreneurial journey to help you grow your business and become more profitable. Ladies and gentlemen, let's accelerate together. Roger, we are very excited to have you on 0 to 100.
Excited to be here.
So you do some interesting business and you work with some very interesting clients as a fractional CFO and a business growth strategist. And I'm actually going to start our session a little bit different than I typically do. And I want you to walk our audience of business owners and entrepreneurs through when they should be considering bringing on a fractional CFO to help grow their business.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say a starting point, well, fractional CFO simply means it's also referred to as outsourced CFO. So a non-full-time CFO, right? So by definition, we're talking about businesses, small to medium-sized businesses that don't yet have the scale to have a full-time in-house CFO. So I'll just get that out of the way. So the question is, when does it make sense? And I would say, I think a common thing, and this is not trying to throw shade on any accountants or CPAs, but I think typically, any for-profit business has a minimum need to do their annual taxes, right? So they do it themselves, or they have a tax preparer, often a CPA or a tax specialist. I think a typical thing is at the point where they might outgrow that particular relationship. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the tax prep that they're getting. But if you think about the business model, the typical professional tax preparer, it's a volume business, right? So they could be at scale, individual tax preparer could be handling 300, 400, 500 tax returns a month for other businesses. So they certainly are positioned to be that advisor, but their business model is not designed to support it, right? So I think a fractional CFO, the way I see it, is they're obviously designed to support multiple clients, but not anywhere near 300 a year, I would say. And because there's only so many hours in a year, so many hours in a week, right? So I think it's really a relationship support. So it's really the point where I think you ask yourself, there's always questions that if I could just have a few more hours with whoever your financial partner is, oftentimes it is your CPA or your tax accountant and so forth. And I guess the question, and only the owner can decide this, but they feel like they're getting the support they need.
So as an owner of a business, what should you be asking yourself, or how should you be looking at your business to determine that now is the time that I bring on that CFO, that fractional CFO? Are there certain milestones that you reach as a business owner where it's like, now's the pivotal point, we need to bring them on?
I think it's case by case. So I think one is just a firm understanding on where they're at in their business. Is their profit stream relatively predictable? It doesn't have to be. I mean, that depends on the industry, depends on the business, but are they in can they get to the point where they really understand what's going on, and are they in sort of no surprises mode? I would say. And I think if they can't really answer that or comfortably answer that for themselves, then I think that they should think about working with a partner. I would say that.
So you look at your CFO, your fractional CFO, as almost like an outside partner to the business. Is there a too early to bring one on scenario, or is it the earlier the better? What would you advise?
I would say the earlier the better. And the way I view it, yes, there is a role. I mean, obviously, fractional CFO is a specific role, just like many fractional CXO types of roles now. It's sort of the part-time thing versus having the full-time. So there's the literal sense, but I would step back and say, like, if you think about, for any business owner, there's the profit. So there's the managing, sort of the financial management of their profit stream, right? The money that they're making. You think, oh, that's my finance person, my CFO's type of thing. So that's the literal type of thing. But I think, and this is true for any chief financial officer or financial manager, is that, what is it really? They're really a partner to the business owner, understanding really the drivers behind how the business is making money. Right. So it's not the results, it's actually forward-looking things. Right. So a lot of those things, what shows up in the financials is really, they're not leading indicators. By the time, revenues get booked in any business, I would say there's 3 or 4 things that are key metrics that exist for every business that generates revenue, that are key metrics that need to be understood. Traditionally, I think maybe a lot of owners don't think of those as what the CFO thinks about, but I think a good CFO does go backwards before the dollars get booked, dollars and expenses, revenues, expenses get booked. In the P&L, I think there's questions and I think the good CEO, to answer your question, really starts first with communicating and partnering with the business owner and understanding the business model, their positioning, and some of those key metrics. I actually call it there's a 7-step pathway to profit that I think, and those 7 steps we can go into later, but I think, there's 7 key steps that exist for every single business to make money, to make consistent profits. And I would say the last 3 it doesn't get till the last 3 are actually P&L metrics. They're in P&L, but the first 4 are actually pre P&L. But I think the job of the CFO is before, and I think it's broader. I think CFO is just a label, right? But I think it goes backwards from that.
Well, we're gonna get to the good stuff, which are the 7 steps, because I'm excited for you to go over that, because I think they're actually fascinating, and a lot of business owners aren't looking at their business in this way. Right. But what I would love for you to talk a little bit about that you just mentioned that I didn't even think of is forward looking. So if you work typically with a CPA and accountant, everything is looking at the past. That's true. If you're bringing in that CFO to look forward, what should I, as a business owner, be asking for your help on or advice on that is forward looking, that's going to grow the revenue and the profitability of my business?
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about the first 4. Well, I mean, the profit thing. Can I take a step back though? Because I think a bigger framework is, so we can get into the specific metrics and so forth. But one thing I wanted to frame are a few key frameworks. One is the 7-step pathway to profit. Okay. Another one is, a framework around thinking about expense management, which is maybe even drilling down of one of the steps in the 7 steps. It is expense management, cost management. So that's actually, step 7. So that's in there. But even I like to go like maybe bigger, higher around the way I think about it is really around wealth creation and a framework around wealth creation in general, okay, which applies to, I think, personal life as well as in business, called coupled with a framework for managing risk. So it's really, and I call this framework the 3 portfolios framework, and it is a fundamental thing in terms of that underlies a lot of my firm's philosophy around how you think about wealth creation and managing risk. So it is a framework. The 3 portfolios framework is a framework for building wealth and managing risk. And I think that puts all these other things in context. And I think it's really helpful to go over that. Can we do that?
Oh, yeah, let's do it. Let's do the 3 portfolios because the key is, and why we're so fortunate to be able to do this, is we get to look behind the curtain into your brain.
Right.
Because a lot of times, and I'm going to speak for the audience of business owners and entrepreneurs, we don't really know what options are out there, how to ask the right questions, how we should be thinking about things. We'll hear it one way, but guess what? It might not work for us. So figuring out how to hone that path, that right product or service for us, this is huge value. So you got the floor, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So 3 portfolios, it is an underlying philosophy, I'll call it. And there's a good article that we wrote several years ago, and it's one of the flagship articles on our website. So you can go to MYeCFO.com, and the 3 portfolios is one of the banner articles, I'll say. But essentially, what it is, it's, as I said, it is a framework for building wealth and managing risk. And 3 portfolios, think of, simply put, there's an A portfolio, a B portfolio, and a C portfolio. And what I like about the article is that it uses a very simple sports analogy. It uses a baseball analogy, right? And it's about, so portfolio A, the A portfolio is, what are the goals there? It's actually to be as successful as possible. So that is a focus in baseball on hitting home runs, right? Getting the biggest bang for the buck and so forth. So that's like, you want to swing for the fences, try to hit home runs, right?
Yep.
As related to your personal wealth building, as well as any business, it really is fundamentally your human capital. What is it that you can get paid outsized, value, or the marketplace values what you provide more than just a commodity, right? What makes you special, right? And so that applies in your personal life, in terms of your own personal capital, as well as think about you're growing a business. Why are you a different business? Why should people come to you versus somebody else, right? So that's your A portfolio. So that's the idea of hitting home runs, swinging over fences. If you're not doing that, they should ask yourself, why are you in that business, or why are you in that career, so to speak, right?
Right.
Okay, that's your A portfolio, human capital, developing that to its full potential, whether it's for individual or for yourself. Let's move on. The B portfolio is essentially, the baseball analogy is saying, let's just get on base, get whatever you take, singles and doubles, consistency, right? Is or small ball, as you used to call it, right? And so there's a time and a place for that, right? So certainly, if you think about it in terms of a traditional individual or business, is that, look, starting out, you have to position yourself, generate consistent earnings, either as an individual or as a business. You start accumulating capital. So over time, that human capital gets converted into financial capital that needs to be managed, right? So it's either a revenue, earnings, profit stream that needs to be managed from a CFO perspective, or it is the actual wealth accumulation capital, either your personal capital or accumulated profits of a business that also needs to be invested and managed, right, and redeployed. So financial capital management, that is the B portfolio, right? Okay. And so the point is that, look, you should swing for the fences, as much as possible to make the most money in your A portfolio.
Right.
And then you should partner with a professional whose game is to manage the B portfolio, the finances, right?
Gotcha.
Unless you really believe that your A portfolio is financial management, right? You are a capital allocator, you're a money manager, you're going to basically be an alpha producer, right?
So in essence, you should only be managing money if your business is managing money, or you have a background in managing money.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And the question is, like, are you going to compete with the, the big dogs in the world, right? That's a very competitive space. And arguably speaking, if you step back and think about it, they do it professionally. It's very competitive. But oftentimes they're actually, it depends, but a lot of them are actually not doing it with their own money. They're doing it with other people's money.
Right.
Right. And then they could have some skin in the game as well. And that's a good thing. But generally speaking, that is their A portfolio. Right. So I would say the criteria for how do you know that shouldn't be your A portfolio and it's your B portfolio? I would say there's three main criteria. One, do you have the knowledge and the know-how?
Mm-hmm.
Two, do you have the time and discipline to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And number three, do you enjoy it actually?
And you know what? I'm gonna jump in because a book that I just read, I wish I would have read it many years ago, by Michael Gerber, is the E-Myth Revisited. Why most small businesses fail. We're always wearing all of these hats as business owners, and what I call when we start our businesses, we are EEOs, everything entrepreneurs.
Yes, or the chief everything officer,
and everything. What is it? Chief executive officer. We're the everything executive officer.
Exactly.
And it becomes a challenge when the business grows beyond our technical expertise. And that's the whole idea behind the book is you've got the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. A lot of times technicians become business owners or entrepreneurs, and they really don't know how to manage people or the business. And entrepreneurially, they have a vision, but they're so focused on providing the technical product or service that they're not able to focus on growing the business. So putting your systems in place are very important to grow your business. And one of the most important and key aspects of that is proper financial management.
Yes, absolutely. So I think I wanted to talk about this first because it provides an overall context of it's not just what the fractional CFO does or the fractional marketing or whatever, because you're absolutely right. For any business starting out, it is chief everything officer. Right? So the question's like your question about, okay, when does it make sense to hire that fractional other thing, the F or the M or whatever it might be, is really the same thing. It's really specific to that industry, specific to that business, and that owner of where they're going to make a decision where it makes sense that, okay, I need this person because this is really clearly outside of what my A portfolio is and has been, right? And gotten me here, right? Because now I'm accumulating, in the financial sense, I'm accumulating capital. There's decisions that you actually have to make on an ongoing basis that you didn't have to, that got you there. And that's what's interesting about business growth is that, like any growth, what you got to this level is a certain set of things. What gets you next level, certain things. And I think that's the biggest value proposition of a fractional is that they work with multiple, businesses in those key phases. And then there should be experts that are best fit for certain phases.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going to get to the C portfolio, right? So A portfolio is your human capital, like how you make your outsized gains or profits relative to the competition. B portfolio is about efficiency, right? It's about, again, consistency, efficiency, not swinging for the fences, singles and doubles, and that really brings on the risk element, right? Because you can't, if you're not fully, that's not A portfolio, then partner with somebody who can do it efficiently and sees a lot. They see the whole playing field, and that helps you it's really about risk management, right? Because the A portfolio is the wealth creation engine. B portfolio is about managing that and minimizing your downside. So you guys, okay, well, is that all you need, the A and B? And we would say the three portfolios is the third part. The C portfolio is sort of to have fun with it, your fun portfolio, right? And it's because it's a human thing, right? That's why I said it's not just business, it's also in life, right? And so if you have a certain itch, right, and you need to scratch it, scratch that itch, right? Meaning and it doesn't fall into, okay, I enjoy it, but I'm not going to get paid outsized, profits for it. And there's cases where these are hobbies or things like that. And also I'm not necessarily doing stuff to make it, a B portfolio. That's kind of boring and mundane, right? But I still enjoy it, right? And so that's a C portfolio. It's a fun thing. It could be angel investments and so forth. It could be volunteering. It could be doing some other things that's quote side hustle or whatever, or a side business. You're minor. And I think it's important because I think that's what makes us different as humans, right? And so you have these 3 portfolios. We'd say, definitely scratch that itch, but keep it less than 5%.
Right.
Don't go crazy. And you have these 3 portfolios, you see when we work with clients, we take on new clients and we look at their things. Sometimes they're just all out of whack, meaning like they're good at what they do. And clearly that's how they got there, but they're way overinvested themselves in their B portfolio, and their C portfolio is just way more than 5%. Right.
Right.
And so it's about focus, right? Because you need all these things to optimize your wealth creation engine in the A portfolio, but also, keep it real and balance. It's a portfolio thing. So at the end of the day, the best way to understand it is really a portfolio allocation of how capital manifests over a lifetime, really, or a business lifetime.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That is very clear. And I think that's actually a very good lead into going over the 7-step pathway to profit.
Yeah.
And these are the type of fundamentals that for our audience are very valuable because it sets a framework for, pun intended, for us on how we should be looking at our businesses, managing our people, managing our money. And then when it comes down to the fun part is really managing your time.
Right.
And a lot of people aren't allocating that when they're thinking of this very strict portfolio allocation of I've got to do this to keep the business running, grow it, make money, grow that. Yes, but you also do have to carve out that balance. So I'd love to understand what the 7 steps look like.
Yeah, let's get right into that. So I would say the 7 steps, if properly applied, should be the domain of the business owner. And so I would say it should be in the A portfolio. And I think it's often overlooked, or business owners are often overlooking the 7 steps together. So let's go through them. Okay. So first, I would call this the 7 steps of key steps that every business owner needs to be doing to work on their business as opposed to only in their business. Okay. So the distinction is working in the business is certainly they're in business, getting paid for a product or service that they deliver. So that's working in the business. That's what gets the revenues in. And I'll just fully acknowledge that I have utmost respect for any business owner that's made it that far to actually successfully be sustainable and delivering a valuable product or service. I mean, I think that is the true essence of being an entrepreneur.
And as we know, as entrepreneurs, that is really difficult. There's a lot of learning you got to do.
Right. So, but that's just, and I don't want to discount the sweat and labor and the creativity and everything it takes just to get to that point. So that's working in the business. That's table stakes, right? Otherwise, if you can't do that in a way, then somebody else is going to do it, and that's the the free market economy, right? So that's working in the business. So working on the business, 7 steps. So let's start first. Step 1 is every business needs to generate leads, right? So their lead generation literally should be measured in terms of what's their average new lead generate per month, per quarter, per year. Like they need to know how many new leads they're getting through all sources, right? So that has to be true. Number 2 is that second step, they have to convert those leads to prospects, right? So what a viable prospect depends on the industry. But typically it's some form where you change the lead into a meeting. You have a presentation or proposal at a minimum. You have a point of engagement where they're more than just a lead in the database, right? So conversion to a prospect. Number 3 is managing your closing rates from prospects to paying customer or client, right?
Right.
But that has to be true, right? So we already have like 3 key metrics that, again, these exist, whether they measure them accurately or not. And you can do that big picture or actually by channel. It's endless. It's endless the way you should measure this.
So Roger, I have a question. When you're going through these steps, are these steps that you should know beforehand, or is this something that you can create with a fractional CFO?
Oh, yes. Well, you should know. So there's one thing is knowing the substance of it, and how you would measure it, and then working actually measure it and dissecting it, meaningfully is, so both are important. But I think I would say you need to know the substance of it first, in your industry and your business.
Got you.
And it doesn't mean that you know the numbers, because I've certainly talked to many, and I'm more surprised if they really know them well. But I don't judge them or discount them if they didn't really know the actual numbers. But I do expect them to know, what it would take to gather, I guess, the data and the background to benchmark these things and to measure them for themselves. Yes. So yes, no judgment in any of this. I'm just being. Is that fairly answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Right. Okay. So we're at 3 steps. So lead gen, number 2, conversion, number 3, closing rates. Number 4 is really equally important. Once they're your clients and customers, you want to understand how well you're retaining client retention rates, right? And that also varies by industry. Absolutely. And so some businesses, you don't have much repeat business. Some it's all about repeat business. Think about insurance, financial services. A lot of it's just keeping the money with the firm, right? So, yeah. Or
so
services.
what's really funny though. Yeah. I want to point this out.
Yeah.
And it's enlightening to me because I've done a lot of marketing research study, whether it's Russell Brunson or Alex Ramosi or Dan Kennedy, or just some of the big ones that are out there that are known names. And they talk about understanding your cost of acquisition, creating that sales funnel, your conversion rates, and all those things. But I've actually never, and obviously they drive revenue for the business, but I've never heard them tied to your economic plan for the business. So this is an interesting look for the first 4 steps, tying this, what is really key marketing matrix, into creating more profitability and proper financial management of your business. Wanted to throw that in there, but keep going. This is really interesting.
It is true. And I'll come back to your observation there once we get through the 7 steps. So these first 4 steps, by definition, are before you even start measuring P&L metrics, right? Yeah. Right. Okay. So these things happen out in the business world before, like, any bookkeeper accountant actually books revenues to transactions P&L, right? And think of all the work that it takes to just to actually manage each of those things, right?
Yep.
Okay. And it's not just one-time work; it's ongoing. You're building engines for each of these things, right?
Right.
Okay. So let's go to the last 3. Are embedded within the P&L, right? So next one is, understanding for all that work of the funnel, and then you have a paying client base, a customer base. Now, just understanding basically, what is your average dollar per sale? Like, think about what are your core products, your core revenues on average for each transaction that your ideal customer makes. What is that? Like, what is that, how much are you pulling in revenues for that product, right? If you're selling clothing, right? Is it your average pair of jeans, $200, right? Simple as that. And, this averages are important because there's a whole distribution, but, the core is like what really explains the outcome of a business, right? But then how many times, what's the frequency of sales in a typical year? Do they buy those pairs of jeans, one and done? Or are they typically like 4 pieces of clothing a year, right? So that's your ideal customer. How often are they buying, right? So your frequency of sales per average customer, right? And then the 7th is what we talked about, managing your costs. So cost management. And that's both obviously your variable costs as well as your fixed costs together, right? So, and arguably, as I said earlier, people think of a CFO as really dealing with, backward from the other side. Oh, costs, and then revenues and volumes and so forth, right? The last 3. But I would say the big picture is that if you step back, and I always say this, these 7 steps, they work together like, gears in a machine, right? And each one drives the next one, and the whole machine needs to be working. Together, they generate a predictable pathway to profit. And if any one of these steps gets clogged up or is not functioning properly, everything downstream eventually slows down, right? It doesn't come to a screeching halt, but eventually you're not going to have predictable, consistent profits or growth.
So talk to me about, and I love this framework, by the way. This is great. And it puts a different lens on when looking at it this way in terms of the overall financial management of your business, because customer acquisition is financial management of your business. It's not strictly sales.
Right.
Now, there's something you said you wanted to mention about that before I go to my next question. What was it that you wanted to mention?
I was feeding off of what your observation about, I think you mentioned a few different writers that you kind of, I triggered for you. And I don't necessarily talk about that, but what I like to think about, if you really understand how these 7 steps work together, one, in your industry as well as for your particular business, because you need to understand dynamics for the industry, because obviously the benchmarks are going to be different for each industry. Like the weightings of these things, right? Again, it's a simple example is like how often a business that doesn't really have that much client retention, right? Then they're going to have to even work harder on the lead gen and the conversion stuff, right? To be all things be equal, right? Just by definition. And the other ones that, they say so you can see how that's the case.
Right.
But the more important thing is it is 7-step, I'll call it pathway to profit formula. And it really is reduced down to a literal equation with 7 inputs, literally, that are some additive at each step, some multiplicative, right? And you get to, like, you start with number of leads per year, your conversion rate to prospect, your closing rate to customer. Then you get to dollars, multiply that by dollars, and then this and frequency. You literally can calculate revenues and bottom line, right? So it's literally a mathematical formula. And understanding math, I'm a math guy, is that, look, you can take any step and understand its contribution to the bottom line. So think of it this way. Again, traditionally, you want to optimize every single step and benchmark where you are and understand how you're doing and how you could do better, right? That's the basic essence of the whole understanding the framework. And then what strategies you can apply where you need to do better, where you want to do better, right? That's strategy and then specifics. But let's say, a simple example, you're always going to, if you see obvious low-hanging fruit in terms of cost savings, right? You're going to take that, right? Because obviously, if you, by definition, save $1 in expenses, you've generated $1 revenues. You're always going to do that, one for one, right? It's often misunderstood is the power of compounding these steps. They compound together in terms of improvements, right? So up front, if you think about it, there's a few multiplicative steps, right? You start with a certain number of leads, your current baseline of how many leads you generate. Then you have, let's say, a conversion rate. So typically I might convert 1 in 5 of those to a prospect, right? And then I might close a third of those after that, right? So right there, the math is actually percentage times percentage, right? Anytime you have 1, 2 or more or multiplicative steps, you have the mathematical opportunity to compound there, right? And that compounding trickles in just like, the way time value of money compounds over time. These steps in the profit formula actually compound. And the higher you go up at the chain earlier, then all those steps that you improve in terms of improving your conversion rate, improving your closing rate, your lead gen, right? A little bit in each one actually compounds and actually has an outsized contribution to the bottom line.
Well, let's look.
I think that this, like the simple example I give you, and I see this all the time in every industry. Guaranteed. So the premise is that every industry sort of has a distribution around these 7 metrics, right? Based on size and all this stuff, right? And explains the different performance of businesses in that industry, right? So let's say you knew what the average sort of metrics were for average, business in that industry, and they just are what they are. And then you oftentimes you take, and this happens all the time, you take a company A, that's sort of an average one, and you take another business that looks probably the same. Let's say bricks and mortar. They look like almost the same size, same staff, right? And let's say that second business looks the same, but you actually looked at their metrics, and that business, the second business is just, they're just a fraction better, 10, 20% better on each of the 7 metrics, right? More leads, it's a high revenue, and like those compound across the 7 steps that it is like, it's not 10% better on the bottom line. It is multiples better.
I'm gonna make a real-time example of this. So one of the merchants, and we do payment consulting, and one of the merchants that we worked with was a multi-location nail salon, and we helped them engage in a program that eliminated their credit card fees. And now that I look at the system that you built here, this 7 steps, this is fascinating to me because they took the majority of their savings, and per location, it was maybe $4,000 a month, and they had 4 locations. So they were saving $16,000 a month.
Right.
They had told me they took about 80% of that money and converted that into Facebook and Google leads. So web leads, which increased the amount of prospects that they had. I don't know if their conversion rate went up, but the saving of the money gave them more capital to reinvest in leads, and they had more prospects to convert. Yeah. And ultimately, not only did the saving of the money increase their profitability right away, it then increased it even more, and it increased their revenue even more because they were able to bring in more clients because they were in front of more clients. And I never looked at it like this like continuous cycle that if we're talking about managing your closing rate, and your closing rate, you're closing 3 customers out of 10 customers, 30% close rate. If you can increase that to a 50% close rate to 2 more customers, then, and you keep the same client retention, the average rev per share, frequency of sales, like that all stays the same, it still compounds because there's more of that client.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is an very unique way of looking at, it's actually not unique. It's just really smart and broken down really well.
I think again, it's not an invention. It's actually more discovering a way to look at it, and once you understand it, what you need to measure in order to manage it, right? That's adage. You manage what you measure, right? And so this is kind of saying, what don't you, because this exists, is a matter of, do you know it or not, right? And I love the example because what you're saying is that, look, it's not something that you can argue with either, right? Like my example about an industry is like company A, company B, and you could say, oh, at the surface look the same, but this one is like, 50% more profitable, right? Just being 10% better on each of these metrics. And you're wondering like, how's that possible? And it's like, that explains it. A lot of times and this is performance in general. I mean, we're talking about business, but analogy I say is, I don't know, so for the golfers out there, it's like, do you golf, Jared, at all?
I do golf. Yeah.
So everybody knows this. You're competitive with your buddies and so forth, right? For either money or pride.
No, not at all.
You go out there and it's like, look, there's obviously a guy who's basically, you think the guy is the same, like has all the same shots, same distances, about the same physical ability, and guaranteed, there's that guy that, end of the 18 holes, he's always 5 strokes better than me, and you're like, well, what explains that? It's just all the little things add up.
But let's stay on the 7 steps, because let's say you're able to create cost savings. So one of the partners that we work with, they provide, and we've started to integrate it into our business because we now have a partnership and we look at everything from the payments ecosystem. They provide technology as a service, meaning they will go in, they'll work with a company to help reduce their internet rates, their Wi-Fi rates, their telephone, their malware, their cybersecurity, and they add to their bottom line, compounding that on saving on even just reducing 0.5 percentage point for your payment processing. You're adding to your bottom line. That addition to the bottom line becomes found money because these are expenses that were fixed. Yes. And all of a sudden you can reinvest those. Let's say we just reinvest them in 2 things, Roger. Like this is like brilliance, what you're dropping. Say we do more advertising for lead generation, and then we invest in more education for our salespeople for conversion.
Right.
So now all of a sudden you found money in step 7. And then in step 1, as well as in step 2, you're able to increase the amount of customers that come through and the higher and have a higher conversion rates. You're right. It's not stepping up your business 1.5x. That's quadrupling your business
Right.
overnight.
Absolutely.
So all of these things are absolutely linked to each other in terms of the financial success of your business. So it kind of, and it's not something we focus on this show in terms of marketing, but the reality is understanding your marketing, your client acquisition costs, your processes, your SOPs around that is what is really driving your business. And your marketing could be word of mouth and referrals. It could be you strictly do paid ads. It could be you do it through partnerships. It doesn't matter what it is. This process truly works for any business, these 7 steps.
Yeah. So that is true. I think now we're getting for the formula, the 7-step pathway to profit formula is a formula. It's a framework. But it doesn't actually tell you strategy at that point. It tells you what's possible and how you measure it. Now you're getting to the point of saying, okay, if you have some dollar savings, where do you invest it for the most return, right? So then you're getting to actually strategic decisions around allocation of additional found monies or additional money to invest. And then it does become an ROI question, right? So then you do projections and you say, okay, where am I going to get the highest return for my investments? And that's true for any investment. It's true for financial investments, true for marketing investments, ad spend, other things in terms of investing your processes, your client retention, customer experience, all those things. But what the 7 steps help you is actually an objective framework to decide where are your choices that you're going to debate saying, okay, is it A, B, or C? Which is it? Right.
So
because if you knew you were maxed out, if you knew you were optimized, then you're going to be skeptical about spending more advertising. Right. Or if you're, and it's not just I think advertising is often, so 2 takeaways from this discussion for, I guess, the audience out there is that, one, do you really know, you probably know your, steps 5, 6, and 7, but do you really know where you're at and where you are relative to your competition in terms of steps 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then the question is, if you really knew that, then you actually would know where you could be doing better or where the opportunities are. And then that's where the payoff, answering your initial question, is like, when does it make sense to really work with that, fractional executive partner to help do these things? I think that's where it's so clear that, you need somebody, going back to say, help you understand your business from this framework and then understand the opportunities for the forward-looking management of your business. Right? And that ties a few of maybe your first 4 questions for me in our discussion. It was because your questions were about, okay, when does it make sense? And how does it tie to your forward-looking decision-making around growing your business, right? So I think, hopefully I kind of set the frameworks around of that's when it becomes actual strategic decision-making, right? And that's where I find it's the most fun and interesting, because then oftentimes I see the pitfall is that if you're just doing what everybody else is doing and you try to do more of them or copy them, that's typically not the answer, right? It's typically, oh, everybody's doing Google ads, so I need to do that, right? And it's like, no, not necessarily, right? It could be the case, but not necessarily.
So you just gave me a lot. This was a masterclass that I personally needed for my business as we're working through a relaunch for 2025 and a rebrand, which we're focused on starting on the 16th of this month for the rest of the month. And I like the way that this is broken down because it could change the conversation that I have with the business owners that we're talking to in regards to the service that we provide, where we're trying to find money that they didn't realize was already there through restructuring their payment or their technology systems.
Right.
And then how you can reallocate that, because a lot of business owners are not looking at their business this way. That I could say, could this help you increase your closing rate by hiring more people? Could it help you increase your conversion rate of prospects by investing in somebody who's a funnel expert and creating the top of funnel and mid funnel metrics that you need to stay on top of the inquiries that you're getting?
Right.
This is some advanced level stuff that this was absolutely stellar.
But it also, I think, to close that out, that thought is also, it makes you understand that it's not just about, the traditional view of cost cutting and budgeting and so forth. It actually gives you a framework to understand expense management, meaning to say that your existing expenses, if you can't tie them to any of the previous steps, then why are you spending on it? Right. So it's kind of thinking like, oh, is that expense helping you, generate leads, doing conversion, closing customer? That's obtaining a client, right? Is it helping you optimize your client retention, right? Retaining clients. Is it helping you increase the lifetime value of the customer? Those are, your average dollars per sale. Those are your frequency of sales. Is it helping generate? The classical thing is like investments around happy customers. Why are they happy? It's because they get the best value, the best experience, right? So if you invest in those and they're going to stay with you, that's lifetime value right there.
I recently had my bookkeeper print out our monthlies, and I've been going through them for the entire year, line by line, of what has contributed to what is mandatory, is something that we can scratch as an expense, what contributes to our revenue, what contributes to our bottom line. And it's fascinating to see the amount of subscriptions. My God, the subscriptions that we have that we don't need and I've forgotten about. And they're all like $49 to $199 a month. And there's a couple thousand right there. But just those little things like that, and even things that I would have engaged in or signed up for, like I got a bill the other day for Midjourney, which is an AI image creator. And it was like 300 some odd. And I said, call them and cancel this and get this money back because I don't actually use it. I got sucked into that vortex of this is really cool. I don't use that. I have a creative team who makes all of our creative. So I shouldn't be paying for this on top of it. So it's little things like that.
Absolutely.
That it's not contributing to my bottom line. So I'm looking at my business in a very different way that I'm like, you got to go, man. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So before we get to the rapid fire section, I have one more question for you. What are some immediate steps that our audience of business owners and entrepreneurs could take to increase the profitability of their business?
Yeah, it's actually just what we just covered. Is really thinking about expense management. So the three rules are that you look at, just simply immediately look at, say, your last 3 months of all your your business outflows, and they need to meet one or more of three criteria. One is does the expense help you obtain a new customer? Or number two, does it help you retain an existing customer? And it's kind of like to criteria number three, does it help you increase the lifetime value of a customer? Right. And those really tie it all together. And that creates that virtual cycle. So it is a 7-step linear chain, but that kind of makes it more of a conveyor belt. Right. So I think just that thing alone ties looking at expenses. And that's typically, when clients hire me, I usually go through that exercise right away. I mean, that's the first thing we work on, right? Cause that typically, more often, pays for me right away.
Right. Wow. That's absolutely amazing. All right. We're going to go into the rapid fire section, the fun stuff. You ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right. Who wins the race, the rabbit or the turtle?
Oh, I'm a turtle guy.
If it was 10 years ago, I absolutely would have said the rabbit. I will tell you now today, I truly believe it is the turtle, and that's a whole segment in itself. If it is a zombie apocalypse, you have to get out of your house and protect your family. What is the one weapon that you would pick to take with you?
Oh, invisibility. Does that count? Invisibility?
It's not. I mean, maybe in the world of Marvel, but not in the real world. But you know what? I didn't put any parameters around this. I like how your brain works. You made up what you wanted to say, so I will give you invisibility, and that might literally trump all the other ones we've ever received. That's awesome. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend our audience of entrepreneurs and business owners read that could help them in the growth of their business?
Yes, I have an ebook myself, actually.
Awesome.
So that's number one. It's called Accelerate: Proven Strategies for Greater Profits. And I cover these frameworks that we talked about with some case studies and examples as well. So that's one thing, a little self-serving. If I, separately, you can decide which one you put in. But another one I felt was quite really on the strategy side. So it was written by my MBA professor when I got my MBA a long time ago. But my strategy professor taught core strategy. He's since passed. About 10 years ago, he wrote a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. The author is Richard Rumelt, Rumelt. And I love case studies, and it really breaks down what good business strategy is in contrast to bad business strategy through a lot of case studies, through specific definitions. And it was fantastic. And I mean, for example, it actually, you hear NVIDIA all the time right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is 10 years ago. One of the cases he goes into is about the early days of NVIDIA and how they position themselves around it. So the proof is in the pudding because he did the strategic analysis. Again, I think it was published 10 years ago.
Wow. Awesome. All right. Next one. Make this one quick. So if you had the chance to go to dinner this evening with someone who is dead or alive, who would it be and why?
I just thought David Bowie. I love David Bowie.
David Bowie. Yeah. Rock on, baby. That's awesome. Let's say you are a small business owner and you're doing $10 million in annual sales, and I walk through your front door and hand you a $300,000 check just for fun.
Right.
How would you suggest that they invest that $300,000 in their business to help them create more profitability?
Well, I would have known. Am I the owner?
Sure, you're the owner in this.
Well, I would have already known where I was in terms of my key performance on my 7 steps to profit, my engine, and it will be what I already decided where I'm focusing on in terms of the lever that I'm trying to optimize. So.
Awesome. And the last question is, what is the single hurdle that you had to overcome in your life to build the level of success that you have today?
I think it gets back to the turtle thing. So I think I've had my share of challenges like everybody and setbacks, you can call them. And it's really understanding what it takes to kind of get back up when you're knocked down. And then what does sustainable growth mean? So that I think that applies both personally. So I can just share, this is kind of personal, but when I was 23, had a pretty serious accident and I had to take 6 months off work to rehab myself. Pretty severe. I don't want to get into it, but it really put me in a place that I wouldn't wish on anybody, but really made me learn a lot about myself in terms of, if you hit rock bottom in any sense, but you have the ability just to day by day, do something, and you'll find you need to reduce things down to, the definition of progress is you can't do something that you tried one day and next day you can do it. Right. And so I think that's a very powerful growth paradigm. Meaning you say, yes, shoot for the stars, but be realistic about what can you do? What's the next thing that you can't do? I mean, what's something that you can't do today, but you think you could do it tomorrow, the next step, and focus on that. And that's the definition of progress. Because one day, if you're focusing on the right things, the next day you can do it. And what was impossible before becomes easy, becomes second nature. It's been ingrained, right? Oh. So it's something that you need to do if you've ever gone through a serious rehab. That's essentially the mindset you have to be. I think it's rare, and it's a good thing that happened to me because it was relatively early.
Right.
But you don't wish that type of injury and recovery on anybody, right? And I think especially all is growth as a kid, and it comes easy, right?
Right.
But when you come to a point where you realize you have to regrow as an adult, but I think this applies to a lot of things. So it's really you can only do that next step. You can't go too much and you flop. It's like kind of a sapling, right? You can't. The sapling needs to go to another inch before it can survive the next rainstorm or next wind thing, right? And it's just like step by step. And so that's why these measurements are really important. And I think it's just so it relates to things I found in terms of how I just make progress and grow personally.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That was excellent. And we're glad you're in one piece, shedding the light that you shed today. Roger, please tell everyone where they can connect with you if they would like to do so.
Absolutely. They can find me at Roger, Roger, at MYeCFO, MYeCFO.com. And MYeCFO just stands for, the E stands for efficient. So I am, or if you would say, Roger is my efficient CFO, Roger at MYeCFO.com.
Awesome. Roger Chen, thank you for joining us on 0 to 100.
Thank you, Jared. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to 0 to 100 podcast. We hope you feel inspired and ready to accelerate your business. Remember, your journey to success starts with a single step. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving for greatness. For more resources and show notes, visit jaredguyrandolph.com. We'll see you next time.